Ingram Smith, Bud Elliott back again for another episode of the Nolecast. As always, we'll thank our title sponsors, Tarpon Cellars Wine Co., tarponcellars.com, coupon code Nolecast for 20% off. As we're fond of saying, some of the better reds in the world, some very complimentary whites for this time of year. Give our friends out in Napa Valley a look. Great people, massive Florida State fans, and longtime supporters of the Nolecast. Just in case y'all are worried, always want to thank the good people at Louisiana Hot Sauce. And Bud, I found something different, dog. It's rare that I just text you, at 9 o'clock at night out of the blue, but I don't know if this will get picked up. Yeah, it's better than I thought it would. This is actually Louisiana Hot Sauce aged in a bourbon barrel. So a little higher, I think you pay $4.50, $5 for this, about 2 times the cost. I did have Christina do a blind taste test with me because I was a little skeptical, as you can imagine. It's good. There is a little bit of a noticeable difference in taste and just a new wrinkle to the offerings from the good people from New Iberia, Louisiana. Always coming up with something down there.
Dude, no doubt about it. And some would say that we are complimentary whites as we, compliment
especially
each
this
other.
time of year.
Yes. And we're certainly complimenting Louisiana Hot Sauce and our good friends at Tarpon Cellars. So we took last week off as we had planned to do for the whole time. I have to burn some of this paternity leave, and Ingram also with the new job has a lot of stuff going on. And we try not to do like 4 shows. So we are back. We have a fairly full show today, maybe 45 minutes ish, I would think, maybe 50, depends. Judging by the Patreon questions, I feel like a lot of people don't have a whole lot of questions right now. So if you do have some questions you want to get answered, make sure you throw those into the Patreon. Patreon.com/Nolecast. We should probably start by putting a bow on Amarius Mims. So that sucked.
That sucked. Very
for
painful.
Florida State, for the kid, for everybody involved, obviously.
Yeah. It was tough. It was tough, as you said, for all parties. Certainly this fan base has gotten a bit of a PhD recently in getting your hopes up and having it all kind of taken away from you. We could say what we want to say about how some of it played out and the understanding of the situation as it evolved, but you thought you were getting a 5-star tackle. You thought you were getting a chance to kind of wrap up an area of concern that's been a deep concern in this program for half a decade, if not more. Thought you were getting the top kid in the portal. Obviously, you're getting, the square root of blank all at this point. But you got to keep moving. I'm not trying to, serve you guys a glass of sugar water and tell you that it's champagne or something like that. But the only thing that I take away from this is that in the collective mind of the broader college football fan, I think this is forgotten within 2 weeks. This isn't some kind of Travis Hunter monumental change of landscape or anything else like that. Again, they're all painful for me. The Mims one might have hurt more than Hunter, but I don't know that you sustained damage to the brand or some of the other things that transpired in December. So it hurts. I think it'll be gone. It'll probably flush itself out of the system a little bit quicker. And you'll move on to the next. And that's really all you can do at this point.
Yeah, I know we got a lot of questions about how other media outlets handled the Mims thing. I don't really want to get into that. I think we talked about that plenty on the prior episode. I do think that's kind of where reporting is going with the intends to sign type reporting. If you look at NFL free agency stuff or NBA free agency stuff, they're not waiting on ESPN to wait until Kyrie Irving signs with whomever. They're like, hey, his mind's made up. I do think FSU is getting Mims. I think FSU did a tremendous job on Mims. Obviously, Mims' friend and former high school teammate getting killed in a car crash is extremely tragic, and I think was a really impactful emotional blow there to him and obviously to his family and to the kid's family. So. I think it made him reconsider some things. I don't really think that FSU could have done anything better. They were on top of this the entire time. They got him on campus. He was not going to visit Miami. I believe that the NIL stuff was done extremely well there, and that is the reason why we don't put out the hey, Mims is a done deal, because I certainly wouldn't have factored that in as a potential thing to happen, I guess you really never can know. So, yeah, it kind of bumps you back down to the expectations that you had coming out of spring, which were expectations for an improved team. But it also imparts a bit of more downside risk to the team, like you had previously. I think we said, hey, if you get Amarius Mims, I think the chance that you miss a bowl game goes down quite a bit because it means you're not dipping into the Lloyd Willis level of player having to play important reps for you on the offensive line. Now, obviously, you are back into that range to where, you could win 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 games. I don't think you're going to win 3. I don't think you're going to win more than 10. Anything else, I think, is if you run your projections, is going to be you're going to get a percentage outcome of greater than 1% on all those, which means we're probably going to have a lot of close games, I would say. I do think this team will be in fewer blowouts overall, and I think it'll be a competitive team, but not getting Mims. You're not going to get another really high-level tackle out of the portal this year. That was your one shot. We don't sugarcoat things here on the Nolecast. I know just doing all the cover 3, and if you haven't been listening to the summer school series, it's been running me ragged, but I feel like it's been exciting content over there on all these teams. We've already taped ours with Noles 24/7's Brendan Sonnone. And, we're actually smart enough not to count Mims in, even though we did it before Mims made his decision, thankfully. So I don't have to retape that. But every single team out there is looking for a tackle in the portal. Alabama took one from Vanderbilt. So that kind of speaks to the lack of level of tackles out there in the portal. I think Bless Harris is going to end up looking like a very smart take for FSU. But yeah, that's kind of the bow on the Mims situation. I don't think FSU should hang its head. Like they didn't get beat by somebody else in the portal. The kid decided to go back to be with his existing teammates. I don't know what else you do there.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's not a whole lot. It's just a horrible situation for what transpired personally for Mims and how that played out and the role that it could have played in his decision. Who knows? I mean, I lost 3 friends of mine that I wrestled with in high school within 18 months of each other in college, and it's hard to make sense of, man. It certainly introduces you into a level of life and consequences and things that you're not, at 18 you didn't really know was there, and all of a sudden at 19 you do. So we all respond to things differently, and if that played a role in him wanting to, go back to what was known to him and in Georgia and his teammates, then so be it, and we certainly wish him the best of luck.
No doubt about it. Did you see some of the Rising Spear news recently?
Yes, yeah. So a defensive tackle out of Mississippi, certainly expected, and we talked about on here. A safety by the name of Dent was maybe not one of the first people that I thought would have a relationship with internal NIL, but good to see, and I think that's probably a decent reflection of some of the strides that Akeem Dent's made over the past 6-8 months or so, or really the past year. I mean, he started to emerge at the end of last year, and hell, all the way from the first play of the Notre Dame game. I don't know if you remember this, Bud, but he comes up, misses the tackle, gets up, runs, makes a tackle 18 yards later downfield. Obviously, you'd want him to make the first tackle, but that level of effort might not have been something that was seen in previous years from Dent, and a player who's very much kind of coming into his own.
I do remember that play, and I think this speaks a lot to the commitment from Rising Spear. They're over 1,000 donors now. Obviously, Matthew Quigley, CEO of Rising Spear now. I think this is really a good thing ultimately, and this is going to be an annual thing that you're going to have to fight off potential tampering from other schools to keep kids out of the portal, especially because the SEC cannot poach from one another after February 1st. Their deadline, like you cannot transfer within the SEC. So if you are a school, I don't know, in like Texas or Georgia, and you need a safety and you scouted the kid, that's a place that you maybe hope he jumps into the portal. And I think that's a win for FSU right there to keep him for sure. Again, he's not a superstar yet, but I think smart teams pay up for guys that they expect to be good players for them. And I do project him as a starter. I think he still has a lot of that ability that he had as a 5-star. He just had never really stayed healthy, as you noted. We do have a couple kids who did jump in the portal. I wanted to kind of discuss that a little bit. So far we have in recent weeks, we touched on Corey Wren, obviously, Hunter Washington, Jordan Young, Quayshawn Fuller, and I think I saw Kobe Gross on Twitter. Is he officially in, or did he just tweet about it?
He had tweeted about it. I don't. I believe I thought that he was officially in as of the end of last week, but I could be wrong about that.
Okay.
I saw him putting his practice tape and everything else out there.
He made such a I guess he's going to DVC, which is DVC Viking football. I think that's a JUCO. DVC.edu. Any idea where DVC is? Diablo Valley College in Pleasantville, California. He's from out there in California, I believe. So he's tweeting about FSU in the past tense. So if I learned one thing about being at FSU, it's how to face adversity. This wasn't a part of the plan, but it's going to be legendary. Ultimately, the thing I think that I learned about this is that the evaluations for the class of 2021 are largely bad by everybody in college football compared to the normal baseline, because you never got to see these kids in person or work them out at all. So you were scouting just off video. And for all the people that are like, watch the tape, you don't need to go to these camps. Well, guess what? You do need to go to these camps, because you spot differences between similarly ranked players, and you're able to differentiate between them. So Kobe Gross was the lowest rated player that they signed in that class. I believe Mike Norvell eval there liked him, thought as a guy to bring in. Probably also a reflection on the tight end room at the time, although it really has not been improved much in his time here. They thought they needed some tight end bodies, and they brought in Kobe Gross. Not a useful player, but I mean, you're going to have a really high attrition rate off this. I believe this is kind of why, timing wise, Norvell's been kind of screwed, and why I think we put out that video. Norvell's not in the hot seat because the guys that I believe would have to cut the checks are understanding of this. Like, you get a transition class, and then you get a class where you never get to evaluate the kids, and you never had them in your camp, like even in the year prior, like a lot of schools would have had. And Hunter Washington is the other one, I guess, who has jumped in.
And Jadarius.
Jadarius Green McKnight as well. Yeah. He's a guy that I thought was always a little bit overranked, to be frank. I just, hitter, but undersized, probably not big enough to be a linebacker, not somebody with plus level cover skills. So I don't think any of these players are players that FSU is going to miss at all. Quayshawn Fuller is probably the most disappointing one in terms of him going, because you think, all right, well, not that he ever really showed that he was going to be a good player for them as far as consistency of approach and dedication to it, but the ceiling was always still there. And so that's disappointing that they could not get him to get with it consistently. And I talked to Quayshawn after the spring game. I've always enjoyed talking to Quayshawn. But like, some of these guys have a level of self-awareness and some don't. And, he was always thinking he was a defensive end. And I was like, I think this guy should play D tackle. I remember him describing the conversation that he relayed to me from Odell Higgins back in the day, when he was saying, hey, Odell told me that if I was, under such and such weight, I could play D end. And at the time, he was like 270 something. I was laughing. I was like, yeah, I'm sure you're going to go backwards in weight. He did. He wanted to play on the outside. Just, I don't know.
Yeah.
Some kids think they're quarterbacks until it's way too late too.
Yeah, that's tough on that kid in particular, because you did start to see his game evolve. He had a better year this year, had some splash plays again from game one. Maybe he lands somewhere that he could truly develop into whatever it was he's going to be. But, that one you always knew was probably either boom or bust. And we've described that as a couple of different kids on the defensive line. But then, of all the ones leaving, certainly Quayshawn Fuller is the one that bothers me the most, as far as a kid who had a chance to continue to contribute and continue to evolve and develop as a prospect.
For sure. Anybody else we need to talk about transfer-wise?
I think that's all the outbound conversation satiated.
I think they'll have one or two more, probably, by the way. Yeah. Like, I don't know necessarily exactly who, and kids change their minds, but I do think that there's more fat to be cut from this roster, to be sure, as a result of having that much turnover in such a short period, as far as coaching staff and then the COVID class. But yeah, one thing though that I don't really expect to turn over is our relationship with Chad and Shannon. The legendary team is absolutely tremendous at giving you the home loan that you want, competitive rates, knowledge of the industry, tremendous customer service. They're going to walk you through the process from start to finish. And I was talking to Shannon the other day. He's like, look, I've managed people. I really just like doing loans. And I really like doing Nolecast loans because when Nolecast listeners call, they have their stuff together. They generally have quality credit. And we work with them, and it's really it's a fun process. We get to talk a little FSU. 844 FSU loan. 844 FSU loan is the number to call, and we hope those guys they're also going on vacation, kind of like we did last week. They're going on vacation soon, so I hope those dudes have a great vacation. Really appreciate their proud support of the Nolecast. I wanted to get one of our listener questions in, which was with exit interviews going on, how do these actually work? And the answer is actually it's kind of different for each kid. So peeling back the curtain here a little bit from college football. Sometimes you can, like, if a kid really, it kind of depends. Are you trying to keep the kid? Are you trying to get the kid to leave? Is it a kid who is motivated by playing time, or is it a kid who really just doesn't care about playing time anymore and he just likes the college life? All of these things are different ways you approach this. If you want the kid to stay, then obviously you're going to talk to him about how much he's developing, how he's going to have increased playing time, likely how if he's not a starting, just he's maybe one injury away, or maybe just one good fall camp away from getting that starting spot. Obviously, there's some stretching of the truth involved there with any exit interview at any school. Then on the flip side, I think it really breaks down to your evaluation of the player. If he's somebody who's motivated by playing time, you just basically tell him he's not going to play. And those guys will usually hit the portal. The tricky part is if it's somebody who is kind of beyond, like they're no longer believing that they are going to be playing in the NFL. And they don't really care about playing time. They just care about living the college life and having a good time. In that case, you need to do the pre-work. I'm not saying this is a good thing, but this is what happens. You need to do the pre-work of putting them on a PIP. Okay. Everybody know what a PIP is? Like a personal improvement plan. Everything is charted like crazy. Is the kid showing up to study hall? Is he showing up to rehab? Is he showing up to weights? Is he showing up to practice? And anything that can be addressed as mandatory, the schools are going to document it like crazy.
It's the college football. It's the college football equivalent of a corporate performance review, basically.
Correct. Yeah. Like I've had coaches tell me we have that kid on a plan. So, like one more slip up and we'll be able to pull a scholarship. And the thing is, you have to document it because scholarships actually are guaranteed now for 4 years at the Power 5 level if the kid lives up to the conditions of his scholarship, right? That and like you don't just get to pull it willy-nilly and say, hey, he didn't live up to the conditions. Like you actually have to go before like a scholarship review board to say like these are the reasons why we are withdrawing the scholarship. So that's how these Power 5 schools do it. It's like, hey, he said he was hurt because a lot of these kids they'll claim they're injured. Okay, which some are and some probably aren't. And then like he didn't show up to rehab. Didn't take that seriously. Doesn't go to study hall. Missed this, missed that, and they're just trying to establish like a pattern of behavior, and then they're able to pull the scholarship there. I expect this to get more cutthroat, by the way, as college football becomes more outwardly professional as opposed to just kind of under the table professional. I think that's kind of obvious, but that's generally how it works. So if you see some kids on the team who don't really give a damn about playing time, but they're on top of their academics, they like all their friends they've made in Tallahassee or wherever it is, and they're like, how in the hell have they not been able to process this kid, for lack of a better word. It's probably just a kid who understands enough, like, hey, I just got to show up when I'm supposed to show up. And this is still treated as a job, because it basically is, even though the NCAA doesn't want it to be. And thus you're not, like, the school knows it doesn't have a case to pull aid.
Fascinating and honest look at something that I think we're all kind of somewhat familiar with, maybe don't know all the details at a granular level. Yeah, again, this is one of those situations where I think, if you're a 30-year-old guy, you've got a pretty good idea as to what this is like. It presents itself in a different package and with a little bit different wording, but the intent may be the same. So, yeah, a good little look behind the scenes there, and glad you're able to answer a listener question in as much detail as you were.
Where do you want to go now?
You want to look at portal needs real quickly? We'll do a couple questions, and that'll probably be the show.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. So you didn't get Amarius Mims. That kind of sucks for you. You still need an offensive lineman. I'm skeptical about FSU's ability to bring in one who's actually going to make an impact. That's not really a reflection on, like, the staff's ability to close. I think they had a very unique circumstance with Mims, and I think they did, straight up, I do think they did a tremendous job with Mims.
Yeah.
Okay.
You answered this earlier in your fact that Bama went to Vanderbilt, right? There's just not that many tackles out there to go get.
It's not like the Vanderbilt kid's like an elite, like, no doubt NFL prospect.
Mm-hmm.
They do need to take another offensive lineman. I think. I just be prepared. Like, the quality of player is not likely to be great. It's probably not a huge difference maker, but you can be a difference maker in terms of if you are the firewall between yourself and playing somebody on the roster who really just will never be able to play, or is just not going to be ready to play this year, or perhaps even next year. So I do think they need to still take one there. What do you think about linebacker? This is one I kind of went back and forth on. I'm not opposed to them taking a linebacker.
I think it has to be a significant ad, or at the end of the cycle, somebody that you just referenced, somebody that is not of the opinion that they're going to come in and get 60 snaps a game or something like that, but they may be able to come in, provide you a little bit of depth, a little bit of experience, and cushion some of the snaps that you have to give Deloach and the UCF transfer. I think if you take a linebacker here, it'll be a kid that can either immediately pop and contend to be a starter, or it'll be somebody at the end of the cycle that you had, maybe one or two numbers left to play with, and you're deciding you're going to take somebody that, raises the floor slightly. So
I agree with that. The other thing I would think is more of a developmental guy, right? Like, if you can get somebody maybe in that 2021 class who wants to come home to Florida, because, like, do you think Deloach is an NFL player?
Maybe in today's NFL, yeah. I mean,
yeah.
But not a sure thing, but it's trending in the right direction.
But yeah. Okay, so hypothetically, I believe that the chance that, like, a parlay of Bethune and Deloach being back in 2023, I feel like the odds of that are low.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it wouldn't shock me if one of them are back, obviously, but I think the chance that both come back are very low. So, given that, I don't really like what you have behind those guys. I think Lundy is a part-time dude at best, even with some of the improvements. Obviously, Dix, I don't think you're going to be able to unlock the hips there. Omar Graham, they like quite a bit, but that's just one dude. So if you could take a guy who's a younger guy and you feel like he's more of a developmental dude, I wouldn't think that's the worst thing in the world. But I think it is worth noting that FSU is sort of in a spot here where they're not able to upgrade the starters that much through the portal anymore. Like, this is definitely a better team than what you saw 2 years ago. Receiver, I think you got to go get one. I mean,
100%.
I think I'm a little bit wrong on Pittman. I think Pittman could end up being their best receiver. We'll see. I'm not buying into Johnny Wilson until I actually see it in games. I don't see it. They went out and did a great job and got Winston Wright, a dude who I think was one of the very best receivers available to a school the level of FSU in the portal right now. And, it's just kind of car crash. Like, do you really think he's going to play this year? Maybe. Do you think he's going to play at a high level this year? I think it's unlikely. No fault of his own, obviously, with the car crash. It sucks. But from a roster management standpoint, I think you need to go. I think you need to go try to get another receiver if you can. It's just a hard sell, given that you already took 4 in the portal, and it's not realistic to think you're going to have a 100% hit rate in the portal or even anything like that. Again, these guys are in the portal for a reason. Now, sometimes it's a good reason, sometimes it's not. But it's not like all of them are super proven commodities looking to go to Bama. The other one I would say is probably DB or defensive end, dude. Do you really trust Grady Vance as your corner 4? I don't know. Skeptical.
Yeah, I'd love to get a defensive end and I know you feel kind of okay with where you are, but if you can get a kid that wants to come home early in the process, kind of you're describing as linebacker, I would take him in a heartbeat, put him in the system for a year, and have him be ready to contribute next year, if not earlier. Defensive back, I would hold off on because it's the one area, and maybe this is a short sample, but this is the one area where I feel this program can go out and elite and recruit at the high school level and source its own problems or source its own solutions rather. That hasn't been a problem. Developing who you have in-house has been, and I don't really see that being all that different, whether or not it's a high school kid or a kid you bring in the portal.
I think that's fair. I also think we have to watch who else jumps in the portal here in the final, in the final 5 days of this cycle, right? Like the deadline is May 1, unless you get a waiver. There could be more guys jump in, and I don't think they're going to be starters, but you never really know. It's certainly possible. You also have some guys who are. I saw a deleted tweet last night, and I'm not going to call the kid out because he deleted it, but I saw it before he deleted it. Guys who are very unrealistic about their market value. Tweeting like, where, what about my NIL? Like, well, you're really any good, right? Like, you're good enough to be a backup on a team in the ACC that is their goal is to make a bowl game. Like, you're not actually a good player. Like, you don't have real value on the open market to any of these teams that are slinging NIL money around. But maybe some of these other guys do, or all it takes is one school. Look at the look at baseball free agency, right? It's like, would they sign him? Would they sign him? No, but all it takes is one team. Same as the draft coming up tomorrow night. Hey, would this team take him there? Would that team take him there? No, but if one team falls in love, that's really kind of all it takes. So we'll see who else jumps in. I don't really think any other starters or significant contributors will right now. But if you could get a D end, I think that'd be a big time thing. We probably should mention Daryl Jackson, by the way, the high school teammate of Josh Farmer. He went to Maryland and put on a good amount of weight. Most of it looks like it was good weight. Obviously, FSU was involved there and they were pushing, but so were Florida and Miami. He ends up picking Miami. I will say, obviously, NIL, I think, plays a factor in this. They announced an NIL deal almost immediately as he committed. But I don't really want to get into that. I think this is largely more about team need. This is a total kick in the pants for Florida. And I'm not even saying Jackson's like a bona fide stud or guaranteed good player. But Miami and Florida both needed defensive tackles in like the worst way. I think for Florida State, they need D tackles in the future, but certainly Jackson was not somebody who was going to get a lot of snaps for you, most likely this year. I think he's got a shot to like start at Miami, and I think he probably would have started at Florida, to be frank. I mean, they've got one guy and at UF, a D tackle, which is something like if you're more bullish on beating Florida this year than I am, here's the guys who are gone off Florida's front seven, just to take us on a total tangent here. Zach Carter's gone. Valentino's gone. Newkirk's gone. Truesdale's gone. Diabate's gone. Hopper's gone. Moon's gone. Chris Bogle's gone. That's like almost 3,000 snaps out of the front seven last year that are gone. They have an absolute beast in Gervon Dexter. And after that, I think they're a little bit in trouble, to be frank, about guys on the defensive interior. And you play them in game 12. So if the attrition monster gets them, there's absolutely a world you could live in. And I'm not saying this will happen, but it is within the realm of possibility that their run defense is just much worse than it was last year. And at times last year, it was pretty leaky. So something to think about. But Miami gets Jackson. They're throwing around quite a bit of money right now with their billionaire and the Life Wallet. They're opening up the Life Wallet.
They're opening up the Life Wallet. Yes,
not an inducement, obviously, et cetera, et cetera. I don't really care about is it inducement or not. Like, of course it is, and every school's doing it. So just do it better. Cool. I wanted to mention that as far as like the most recent transfer portal guy that FSU was on, but I do think they'll still try to add two, three more dudes in the portal, I would think.
Yeah, as you said, a lot of activity here in the next week or so as we approach that deadline to enter, and then you get a better idea as to what's out there. You just have to enter the portal. You don't have to make a decision, correct?
Correct. You do not have to make your decision by May 1. You have to be into the portal by May 1. And you can still go back to your school if you are in the portal by May 1. It's just sort of the rule is intended to provide some base level of clarity with respect to when you go into the portal and like what a roster is going to look like come fall. So you don't have guys jumping in the portal
getting recruited away in August. Right.
Now you can still jump in the portal in August. You just, without a waiver, you can't play immediately at your new school. You do have to. It's the old thing with the sit, the 1 year. I think that will probably go away. By the way, in the next couple of years, I think it's going to be seen as like a restriction on movement. But I don't think it's going to happen in like the next 2 years. But maybe in the future, it'll depend on like contracts and whatnot, I would think.
All right. We'll get to our listener questions here, that of which we didn't kind of organically cover throughout the course of the podcast. As always, we'll thank the guys at Congruity. CongruityHR.com is the website. Matt Lewis is our friend and contact there. Been nothing but great for the Nolecast. And I'm shocked by how many people over the last couple of weeks or so have reached out to me and said, yeah, I reached out to Shannon for a loan, and then I called Matt Lewis about my payroll or whatever else it is. So that's pretty fantastic. The amount of movement that we've gotten on this over the past couple months or so has been great. Bud referenced that I took a job a couple weeks ago, and I like to kind of keep my life bifurcated, but working in podcast and for a marketing agency here in Atlanta, and I'm in the job for about 10 days, and all of a sudden down the hall, I hear president of the company complaining about fees that he's never seen associated with our payroll or whatever else. And I thought, I didn't plan on being the jackass that immediately plugs an existing sponsor of his at a new position. But hey, let's talk with Matt Lewis about payroll here. So that's a reflection of how much I value Matt and what he's been able to bring to the Nolecast. And we think that he would only do similar with your agency or operation. So if you got 10 minutes, give him a call. 5 minutes on Florida State football, 5 minutes on where Congruity can help you. And a big thank you, as always, to Matt Lewis and his team.
Let's take Connor's question first.
All right, so Connor says, why was Florida State able to compete for high-end recruits during the Jimbo years, but seems to consistently lose out now? Is there not complete buy-in from the booster? Has the cost of doing business risen dramatically? Or is it a combination of the two and perhaps other factors?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think they had a really good recruiting staff in Jimbo's first iteration of the staff, and then I felt like that fell off a decent bit in the second and sort of third editions of the staff. I certainly think that NIL has something to do with it, but honestly, like a lot of it is you really haven't been winning very many games, and internally the program has had some issues going back to like 2014, 2015. So it's just really not been like a much of a factor nationally for about 7 or 8 years. So it's just, you're not going to get a whole lot of elite level kids to say yes to you if you're not winning a whole lot and if you don't have a whole lot of hype. Right now, they don't have a whole lot of hype and juice on the recruiting trail. This is why I asked, are we just playing out the string on National Signing Day? Right? Because I felt like that was the last year you would actually have serious hype on the recruiting trail. Now, I think they are still doing a good job with what they have, and I'm not totally convinced you are just playing out the string. But a lot of this is just if you don't win games and other schools become kind of the hot new thing, it's hard to just all of a sudden become the hot new thing yourself if you don't have that new coach smell. And now what you're going to see is Florida and Miami beating FSU on the recruiting trail because they have the new coaches and they're able to sell the hype, whereas FSU really can't sell the hype anymore, and they don't have the proof of concept. A decent bit of that's out of their control. So they're going to have to be really, really good at scouting, which I don't know. We'll see if they can do that. And there are stepping up efforts quite a bit with NIL. And I do think as well, like the conference payouts have something to do with this, certainly. Like the SEC is lapping the ACC in money. I mean, they're going to triple them at some point. So, at a certain point, that kind of chokes you out his ability to compete on the real national level. Is that a little too honest?
No, I mean, it's just the case. That's the
relationships with the bagmen too. I would say, kind of come and go depending on which people they like and which people they don't.
That's where I was going to take this. Yeah. Okay. I think there was a feeling around the program in 2010, 11 or so that if we don't get this right on the recruiting trail, we may never be decent again, ever. And like you said, Florida State had staffed with almost exclusively recruiters, and people were, knew you needed to go out and get players, grown-ass men, and everything else that Jimbo referenced at the time. So I do think that there was Jimbo was really good at, figuring out who was there to support him and where that support was coming from and establishing those relationships. And that, even at that point in time really mattered. I do think the cost of doing business has risen dramatically, Connor. We've talked about that before. Not that I expect you to listen to every Nolecast ever, but a couple of years ago, I laid out some examples of like linebacker prospects and how much those had drastically escalated, even just throughout Willie's time here. So, yeah, the cost of doing business has gone up. We'll see what happens. I mean, Florida State knows the landscape, knows what it has to do. And to an extent, there's some of that eagerness to be competitive again in the kind of atmosphere of support that there was 10 or 12 years ago. And we'll see if that translates to the recruiting trail.
I would agree with that. All right, let's go ahead and take Austin's question. Here goes, hey guys, y'all are off this week. When you pod again, can you talk about how kids transfer with the school already picked out? I get you can't exactly explain how it happens for obvious reasons, but a general idea. I imagine handlers / high school coaches / trainers are good contacts, but I'd love to hear it. Sure. So it's essentially tampering. I would say all of these schools do it, whether or not their head coaches say they don't is irrelevant. I think some schools probably do it a little bit more. It's very easy to just call the high school coach and check in on his players and also ask about former players. Hey, how they doing? Is he getting playing time up there? Is he happy? You still talking to him? Calling the 7-on coach, the handler, whomever you feel like is connected to the kid. In some cases, you just talk to the kid. Like most of these coaches, not most. I can't say most because I've never done a survey on this. I think a good number of these coaches have burner phones, right? Like it makes sense to go to 7-Eleven and just get a $75 phone and keep that where it's not actually connected to you as opposed to, using your school issued phone for sure. When I talk to coaches, I straight up ask them, is this a school phone or is this, your personal? Because I don't want to get FOIA'd in any kind of text messages, and if it's, I write in my contacts, parentheses school, so I don't text them. Not anything nefarious. I just don't want my communications to end up in FOIA. So, Twitter DMs, certainly, especially if you have burner Twitter accounts are pretty common. like there's a boatload of recruiting that goes on before these kids hit the portal. Most of them are not flying blind, I would say. Yeah, that's basically how that works.
Interesting talk there, and good to get your perspective on something like that. That's not every podcast is going to be able to offer. Final question of the day comes from Sean. Sean says, do you see the SEC getting rid of their interconference February 1st deadline? Seems to be a massive disadvantage in this day and age where tampering behind the scenes. Appropriate. Do you think FSU will try to look through the depth charts, quote unquote, in the SEC and reach out to guys that at this point appear destined for second team reps?
I would say that FSU actively scouts the depth charts of SEC teams and almost every Power 5 team out there, for sure. I know they do this. Every school that I talk to does. I do not think the SEC will get rid of its interconference transfer deadline. One of the best things that the SEC did,
I do think they'll move it
earlier.
No, I think they'll push it back into March.
Why?
Because they want there to be. I think they want. Well, it'll be. I think it'll be either right before or right after spring. Is my take on the situation. They want there to be a little bit more clarity to that, and they want the deadline to stay there because they don't want schools picking off each other's roster throughout the spring and summer.
Yeah.
But I do think I've heard talk that they may push it back a little bit.
Interesting. My thought is like the best thing the SEC did happened about 25 years ago or so. And that the SEC commissioner at the time got these schools to stop snitching on each other for cheating.
Yeah.
And if the closer you move it to the season, the more allegations of tampering you're going to get. You know what I'm saying? But, well, I guess if you move it to early March, like right before spring, that's not the biggest deal. You know, if you move it back even more, imagine if you go SEC to SEC. Like the SEC is the league that's going to have the most NIL because their fans care the most about football. You know, I think FSU fans care a lot about football, but not as much as some SEC schools do. And certainly, like on a whole, the league cares a whole lot more than the ACC does. So I think you'd get a whole lot of tampering allegations going. And I'm sure that I almost said Mike Slive, but Greg Sankey probably doesn't want that. But if they push it back, that'd be interesting.
Yeah.
FSU's guaranteed they've already been scouting all these depth charts for sure. They've probably watched all the spring games. They've looked at the snap counts, see who played, who didn't. And then, of course, they would never do tampering. So they'd probably just wait until some of those guys reached out to them once they were in the portal.
I'm sure that's how that would happen. Absolutely. Yeah.
I think that's a wrap, man. Kind of a quiet week. And, did you see FSU is doing the mega camp again?
Yes, I meant to put that on our show sheet. I did see that there'll be the second year of the mega camp.
I'll be going to that. Always good to help out Knowles 24/7 a little bit. And I'm sure Ivans will be at that as well. So that'll be cool. And they're also doing their camps in Tallahassee again. They had great turnout last year. I know the one thing the coaching staff is like the most excited about, though, is that they're finally able to get back out on the road and see prospects. And when I say get back out on the road, that's not even really a true description of the issue because this staff has never been able to go on the road for the spring evaluation period. They were hired in December of 19, and almost immediately the world shut down in March. And it was very weird. You couldn't go anywhere by NCAA rule. So you weren't able to recruit off campus. And then last year, they were again not able to do it because the COVID restrictions were still in effect through the end of, I believe, April. So, or maybe through May. I'm trying to remember when. At a certain point, kids could come on campus, but you still couldn't recruit off campus. So this is their first spring they've been able to recruit off campus. Now, look, I'm not saying that's the biggest deal in the world, but I absolutely guarantee you that the inability of this staff, by rule, to see prospects in person has had a real correlation with the overall talent on this roster right now. You had a transition class that, we were smart enough to say at the time, this transition class will probably suck. Almost all of them do. They need to hit the 2021 and 22 classes out of the park. Boom, COVID. Again, I do think that the money people at Florida State understand that Norvell is bringing a level of stability to the program right now. I think the buy-in's a lot better than it was. I think the organization is better. The talent is not getting better fast enough, I think, to have huge jumps coming, but it could be. I mean, if a few more kids hit than I expect. But the people who have the money, like the big boosters and whatnot, I believe are aware of some of the factors here. And are like, hey, we trying to throw some money at the problem in terms of increasing staff size. And also, you guys have to control your controllables. In fact, that phrase was used to me about Mims, right? One of their bigger boosters just said, hey, you got to control your controllables. They did what they could do. They did a great job. Had the kid locked in and wasn't going to go visit Miami and all that stuff. Stuff happens. You really can't control the fact you had COVID. You can control your response to it. But if you hadn't had kids on campus in 2 years as a staff because you weren't here the prior year, that is difficult. And they can't go back and change that. I guess I'm rambling here. Oh man. But yeah, that's kind of the dealio there.
Fair enough, man. So it's probably appropriate to begin and end with Mims. As far as the conversation, decent amount of information and perspective crammed in the middle there. And as always, hope you guys have enjoyed the Nolecast. We'll be back into our rotation here for the next 3 or 4 months of doing, a show every week, a show every 10 days at the most. But we'll have weekly episodes for you pretty much moving forward until we get into our our game season schedule, where we do 2 in an instant once the games start up, and we'll start to talk to you about preview series and all sorts of things. But for now, we'll take you through these summer months. Always be a good time. Appreciate all the support we've received. And for myself, Bud, everybody else associated with the Nolecast, we'll be back with you in the next week or so.